Could not for the life of me figure out the audio for the live stream, so there is no live stream right now. I know what I'm going to be doing for probably most of the afternoon. Two announcements before we get started. One, tonight we're going to be starting our study in Revelation. Given the nature of the book, tonight we're probably just going to be talking mostly about background information and how to go about reading the book. And then next week we will get into actually reading the book. Last announcement, my wife is expecting another child. Before you ask, it was not planned. But we're still happy anyway. All right. In our short-sightedness as humans, we often get frustrated with God when things don't go our way. Imagine that you're praying for a promotion at work. You work with honesty and integrity. You do a great job. You're qualified. And when the time comes for the promotion, another person gets it. This person lacks your integrity and your work ethic. They lied about their qualifications. They cheated to get the promotion. When you find out the news, you ask God, why? Maybe you even accuse God of not being fair. I asked for this, God, and I deserved it. Why'd you give it to someone else? You know, I get it. I haven't had the situation at work where I'm praying for a promotion or anything like that, but, you know, when my Aunt Gloria passed away last year, we'd all been praying for a long time she would get better. It was hard not to ask God, why? I don't understand. My cousin, her husband, they just had a baby. He has brain cancer and he's getting sicker. And we've been praying for him to get better. It's hard for us to not ask, why, God? Why are you letting these bad things happen when we're praying for something else? It's really easy to question God. That's kind of what we talked about last time I was up here. We were looking at Habakkuk chapter 1. He went through some pretty similar things. He experienced a lot of emotions, disappointment, frustration, possibly even anger. He questioned God. He said, God, why don't you answer my prayers? Why is this wickedness allowed to continue in Judah? Do you even care? And God answered. We saw that. He said, I'm aware of what's going on, and I'm going to use the Chaldeans, or Babylonians, to discipline Judah. And then, of course, we saw Habakkuk's response to God's response, and he was frustrated and confused. How could God use them? They are far more evil than the people of Judah. God, you can't stand sin or evil, but you're tolerating and using them? It even looks like you're rewarding them. They're getting rich and powerful. It's not fair. It's not right. If we're honest, I think we can all relate to what we read in Habakkuk chapter 1. We all have times where we question the wickedness in the world. Why does God allow it? Why doesn't God do something? Why is he silent? Imagine the people in Ukraine this last while. Imagine their prayers to God. God, why are you allowing this evil to happen to us? Why aren't you doing anything? Or imagine the people in Israel and Palestine right now. Israel and Palestine have been in conflict for 70 years. I'm sure over the course of that 70 years, they've been praying, the Christians anyway, and the Jews and the Muslims in their own ways. They've been praying, maybe not to the right God, but they've all probably been asking, why is this continuing? Why are we still fighting? Why are people still dying? God, why aren't you doing anything? And then after years of God probably praying for God to help them, we have these terrorist attacks, and they're probably like, God, I don't get it. And the rest of the world, we're all thinking the same thing. God, we don't get it. And we've all experienced frustration at God's answers. We don't understand. Things seem to be worse. Or maybe we even think God should have done things differently. We learned some lessons from Habakkuk and his interaction with God. We learned that he brought his questions to God and expressed frustration over his answers, and that we can do the same thing. But then what? Where do we go from there? Well, I think to answer that question, we have to continue to look at Habakkuk and his interaction with God. This week we're going to look at chapter 2, and we're going to see God's answer to Habakkuk's frustration at his first answer. So starting in chapter 2, we're just going to read verse 1 to start. I will stand at my guard post and station myself on the lookout tower. I will watch to see what he will say to me and what I should reply about my complaint. Habakkuk chapter 2 opens with the prophet saying, I'm going to stand at my watch post. I'm going to station myself on the tower. I have made my questions, frustrations, and objections known to God. And now he's ready for God's response. I actually like the way the New King James Version translates this one verse. It says, Habakkuk plans to watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. I think that's a good translation. Habakkuk's mindset, right from the very beginning of chapter 2, shows that he knows he has missed the mark. And I think we need to share that mindset these days, going into this lesson. We need to understand that when we are frustrated with God and confused about what he is or isn't doing, it's okay. But we need to keep in mind that the reason we feel that way is because we are the ones missing something. We don't have the same perspective as God. We're not seeing what he sees. It's okay to be frustrated, but we have to know that's not because God's messing up. It's because we are missing the mark. We're missing something. God finally responds to Habakkuk in chapters 2 verses through 5 and onward, but we're going to read 2 through 5 to start. The Lord answered me, write down this vision. Clearly inscribe it on tablets so one may easily read it. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It testifies about the end and will not lie. Though it delays, wait for it, since it will certainly come and not be late. Look, his ego is inflated. He is without integrity, but the righteous one will live by his faith. Right now, he has started to talk about Babylon with an emphasis on Babylon's king. So he continues in verse 5. Moreover, wine betrays. An arrogant man, the king of Babylon, is never at rest. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol, and like death he is never satisfied. He gathers all the nations to himself. He collects all the peoples for himself. And before we continue, the part about the wine is a bit confusing. But from everything I've understood, drunkenness is recognized by ancient historians as characteristic of the Babylonian people. And so when he talks about wine betraying an arrogant man never being at rest, he is still talking about Babylon and the way they are and the way their king is. The Lord answers Habakkuk by telling him to write down what he tells him, that the prophet should make it plain so that everyone who reads it from that day forward will see that God did exactly what he said he's going to do. And that's something we'll examine in the future. God tells Habakkuk this is going to take some time. And it may not make sense at the moment, but in the end it will. In the end, God will receive his glory, and in the end, justice will come forth. God answers Habakkuk right off the bat by saying, I do see what you're talking about, and I am going to deal with it. In verse 4, we have a powerful verse that is quoted by Paul in Romans and Galatians, and is also quoted in Hebrews. The righteous shall live by his faith. The implication in this spot is faithfulness, which means loyalty, truth, and trust. It may take some time, but God promises something will happen, and Habakkuk and the people are to live by faith. They are to continue to trust in God and cling to his promises, no matter how bad it might get first. Now, that truth is echoed all throughout Scripture. As believers, we do not live by what we see with our eyes. We do not live based on circumstances and situations. We live by faith. Continued trust in God, clinging to his promises. So after God tells him, write this down, and I'm going to start talking about the king of Babylon, he gives a series of woes about Babylon in verses 6 through 19. So let's take a look at that. Won't all of these take up a taunt against him with mockery and riddles about him? They will say, woe to him who amasses what is not his. How much longer? And loads himself with goods taken in pledge. And those who disturb you, wake up. Then you will become spoil for them. The Babylonians take what is not theirs, and soon it will be taken from them. Since you have plundered many nations, all peoples who remain will plunder you, because of human bloodshed and violence against lands, cities, and all who live in them. The second woe, woe to him who dishonestly makes wealth for his house, to place his nest on high, to escape the grasp of disaster. Babylon was relying on wealth to keep them safe. The capital of Babylon was built on a high hilltop for protection. But in the end, it did not matter. For the stones will cry out from the wall, and the rafters will answer them. Oh, I skipped to verse 11. Let's go back to verse 10. You have planned shame for your house by wiping out many peoples and sinning against your own self. Now verse 11. For the stones will cry out from the wall, and the rafters will answer them from the woodwork. There will be justice. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with injustice. Is it not from the Lord of armies that the peoples labor, only to fuel the fire, and countries exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord's glory as the water covers the sea. Time for the third woe. Woe to him who gives his neighbors drink, pouring out your wrath, and even making them drunk in order to look at their nakedness. The Babylonians are violent, and they deliberately shame and dishonor their neighbors. You will be filled with disgrace instead of glory. You also drink and expose your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will cover your glory. The cup meant divine retribution. For your violence against Lebanon will overwhelm you. The destruction of animals will terrify you because of your human bloodshed and violence against lands, cities, and all who lived in them. Babylon tore down the forests of Lebanon to use that wood for massive building projects. They upended and destroyed the habitats of many animals and people. What use is a carved idol after its craftsman carves it? It is only a cast image, a teacher of lies. For the one who crafts its shape trusts in it and makes worthless idols that cannot speak. Final woe. Woe to him who says to wood, wake up, or to mute stone, come alive. Can it teach? Look, it may be plated with gold and silver, yet there is no breath in it at all. Babylon puts their faith in wealth and in useless idols. So in the remainder of Habakkuk 2 that I just read to you, God makes it known that he sees the wickedness of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. He knows their pride, he knows their violence, their brutality, and their godlessness. He is answering Habakkuk's complaint that he's not dealing with their wickedness and even rewarding it. God makes it plain their day of reckoning will come. God will not allow himself to be mocked. God finishes his reply to Habakkuk with one sentence. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let the whole earth be silent in his presence. What a good statement to close with. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let the whole earth be silent in his presence. God is reminding Habakkuk that he can be trusted. God is in his temple. He is present and he is in control, even when he seems silent in the moment. And all the earth should be silent before God, should be silent and consider his awesome nature, and know that he is in control over all. This is an amazing response to Habakkuk's questions and frustrations. But what can we learn from it? What does it mean for us today when we are expressing and experiencing frustration and fear and confusion? Well, first, I think we learn that we have to have the proper mindset. Bring your questions and frustrations to God, as we learned before. But remind yourself that God does not make mistakes, and God, unlike us, knows everything. So remind yourself that it is okay to question and be frustrated, but know that it's only because you're missing something. Your perspective is too limited to see the whole picture. Ultimately, it is our thinking that needs to be corrected. God's perspective is completely different than ours. We are limited by time and space. God is not. Our way of thinking sees only in part. God's way of thinking sees everything. So you must have the proper mindset while you wait. Habakkuk is told to wait. God's response to us is sometimes very similar. He says, I'm doing something, but you need to wait and see what it is. It's going to take time. Wait with hope. God tells Habakkuk, you need to wait for this, but I will destroy the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. They will get what's coming to them. You just have to wait. Wait with hope. Wait with hope in God's future justice and action. We wait God's response and his action with hope. And while we wait, we live by faith. That is the source of Habakkuk's hope. It's faith. His continued trust in God and the continued clinging to his promises. We, as Christians, live by faith, by faithfulness. We trust God and we cling to his promises. For us, a promise of a future resurrection, the promise of Jesus' return and the restoration, the promise of intervention. Don read this for us earlier, but Psalm 72, 12 through 14 says, For he, God, delivers the needy when he calls, the poor and him who has no helper. He has pity on the weak and the needy, and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence he redeems their life, and precious is their blood in his sight. That could be immediate intervention. It could be future intervention. Or it could be the intervention that comes with Jesus' return. But it is an intervention. And so, we cling to God's promises for the future, and we wait with hope for his response to our prayers and for his intervention. We live in some scary times. Some of us in here have lived through similar scary times in the past and probably thought it wasn't going to happen again in their lifetime. There are wars, there are terrorist attacks, and behind all of that, threat of an even greater conflict. I can't say why Russia is allowed to continue attacking the Ukraine. I can't say why God allowed the Hamas group to attack Israel. I can't say that I know what he's doing. But I do know he's doing something. I wish I could, but I can't say things won't get worse before they get better. And I can't say that God won't raise up someone worse to punish those who are doing these things right now. I can promise that things will get better in the end. In the end, whenever that end comes, there will be justice. God will intervene somehow. God's always doing something. We just can't see it. I repeat, there will be justice in the end. Might be the end of these conflicts. It might be the end of time. Might be both. We don't know what God's doing, but He's doing something. We are a people of hope. God has given us the hope of eternal life. He has promised that He intervenes for those who are in need. Those are both promises that we cling to by faith. It is the hope that we hold on to. God also promises, again, there will be justice in the end. So we have hope, and we need to share it. Christians are not meant to be cynics. We're not meant to be doom and gloom people. We're not meant to be obsessed with everything bad we read on the internet or see in the news. I'm not saying don't be informed. I'm saying don't be obsessed with it. We are a people of hope who share that hope. Jesus offers hope. He is a light in the darkness of fear and despair, and we need to share that hope. That's all we can offer to the world right now. And it is the best thing we can offer. Because what do people need more than hope and justice? Hope in justice, in Christ. We may not understand what's going on. And we may wonder why God's taking so long. But we wait with hope while clinging to His promises. And we share it. Go out and share it. Be a light of hope in this world.